The rain outside the glass rotunda of the Grand Crest Hotel fell in heavy, rhythmic sheets, washing over the marble steps and blurring the neon lights of the financial district into streaks of gold and crimson. Inside the grand lobby, 30-foot crystal chandeliers cast a warm, opulent glow over polished Italian granite, hand-woven Persian rugs, and tuxedo-clad patrons conversing in hushed, privileged tones. Walking slowly along the perimeter of the mezzanine was Gabriel Cross. To the wealthy guests sipping vintage champagne in the lounge below, Gabriel was nothing more than part of the architectural background. A tall, broad-shouldered black man in a dark navy, slightly faded security uniform with a polished brass badge that read G. Cross, Maintenance and Security. He held a heavy brass floor buffer in his collared, gloved hands, pushing it with practiced, deliberate calm. His posture was relaxed, his head slightly tilted as if he were merely watching the clock tick down toward his 4 o'clock shift change. But beneath the weathered cloth of his uniform sat the muscle memory of a lethal operative. For 22 years, Gabriel had served as the chief commander of the U.S. Marshals Witness Security Division. He was a ghost in the federal apparatus, a tactical architect who had designed high-level protection detail strategies for federal judges, cartel whistleblowers, and foreign diplomats. He possessed an uncanny, photographic spatial awareness. Without turning his head, Gabriel noted every entry point in the atrium, the precise blind spots of the hotel's dumb cameras, the weight distribution of the security guards stationed at the valet, and the exact interval at which the service elevators ascended to the VIP tower. 8 months ago, federal intelligence received whispers of a high-level mole inside the regional law enforcement network, tied to an imminent hit on a classified federal witness arriving in the city. Gabriel had volunteered for a dark cover deployment, abandoning his executive suit, turning in his federal vehicle, and taking an entry-level night security job at the Grand Crest, the primary transit hub, where the witness was scheduled to be covertly housed. He took no backup. He left no paper trail. To the world, he was just a retired veteran taking low-wage night shifts to make ends meet. Gabriel stopped the buffer near the mahogany railing of the second-floor balcony, his sharp eyes casually drifting down toward the banquet hall entrance on the main floor. Stepping through the double brass doors, carrying a heavy silver tray loaded with crystal glassware, was his 21-year-old daughter, Aria. Aria wore the standard hotel catering uniform, a crisp white collared shirt, black vest, and dark trousers. Her hair was tied back in a neat, professional bun. Despite working a 6-hour shift after a full day of university lectures, her movements were fluid, precise, and alert. She set the tray down on the service station with grace, checking her wristwatch before wiping down the glass rim with a clean linen towel. A soft, genuine warmth flickered in Gabriel's dark eyes. Aria was his entire world. After his wife passed away 5 years ago, Gabriel had raised Aria with a balance of deep tenderness and quiet discipline. Although he kept his true federal clearance hidden to protect her safety, he had passed down his observational sharp-mindedness to her. Aria was currently an honors student in criminology, working late nights to pay off her textbooks and lab fees without taking a single dime from her father's modest pension. Gabriel reached into his heavy jacket pocket and felt the small, insulated metal flask of hot chamomile tea he had prepared for her before they left their small apartment that evening. He knew her feet were aching. He knew she had been standing for hours. Down on the floor, Aria paused, adjusting her tray. As if sensing his presence, she looked up toward the second-floor mezzanine. When her eyes met Gabriel's, a subtle, affectionate smile softened her tired face. She gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, a silent ritual between father and daughter that meant, "I'm doing okay, Dad." Gabriel offered a faint, reassuring nod in return. Suddenly, The heavy double doors leading to the executive management offices slammed open with aggressive force, shattering the peaceful atmosphere of the service corridor. Stepping out onto the marble floor with heavy, arrogant strides was Montgomery "Monty" Sterling, the hotel's night operations manager. Monty was a slick, 35-year-old man in a tailored, slim-fit Italian suit, his hair gelled back with obsessive perfection. Born into a wealthy family with minor shares in the hotel group, Monty viewed the Grand Crest as his personal kingdom and treated every hourly worker under his supervision as disposable labor. Monty held a digital tablet in one hand and a half-empty espresso cup in the other. His eyes scanned the banquet hall floor, instantly locking onto Aria standing near the service station. "Cross!" Monty's voice barked sharply across the quiet hall, loud enough to cause a pair of wealthy hotel guests near the piano bar to glance over in mild disgust. Aria immediately turned around, standing at attention with her hands folded behind her back. "Yes, Mr. Sterling?" Monty strutted over, his leather designer shoes clicking loudly on the granite floor. He stopped less than 2 feet from her, looking her up and down with open condescension before tapping his tablet screen aggressively. "Why is table 14 still uncleaned?" Monty sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "The VIP conference dinner ended 10 minutes ago. You're supposed to have that entire floor cleared, sanitized, and reset for tomorrow morning's breakfast summit by 11 p.m. The keynote speaker just finished his closing remarks 5 minutes ago, Mr. Sterling," Aria explained calmly, her voice even and polite. "I waited for the guests to vacate the room before entering with the bussing carts, so as not to interrupt their conversation." Monty stepped closer, leaning in with an overbearing, intimidating posture. "I don't pay you to think or analyze guest behavior, Cross. You're a banquet server. You clear plates when I tell you to clear plates. If you can't keep up with the pace of a luxury establishment, I can easily find 5 other college kids who won't make excuses." Up on the mezzanine, Gabriel's hands tightened around the rubber handle of the floor buffer. His broad shoulders squared slightly, his dark eyes locking onto Monty with an icy, lethal stillness, the quiet, dangerous focus of a predator watching an unsuspecting threat. He did not break cover, he did not yell, but he slowly turned off the buffer's motor, stepped away from the machine, and began walking toward the grand staircase leading down to the main floor. Down below, Aria kept her chin held high, meeting Monty's arrogant glare without a single flinch of fear. "The table will be cleared in 3 minutes, Mr. Sterling." "Make it 2, Monty snapped, tossing his dirty espresso cup onto her silver tray with deliberate disrespect, splashing dark liquid onto the clean white linen. "And clean up this mess. I won't have sloppy staff ruining the reputation of my floor." Monty turned on his heel to walk away, only to find his path completely blocked by a massive wall of dark navy uniform cloth. Gabriel stood directly at the base of the staircase, his 6'2" frame towering over the manager. His hands were resting casually by his sides, but his presence was so immovable, so profoundly grounded, that Monty involuntarily took a sharp step back, his face flushing with sudden, defensive annoyance. "What do you want, Gabe?" Monty sneered, looking up at the older man with disgust. "Don't you have floors to polish?" Gabriel didn't blink. His voice was a deep, quiet baritone that carried no anger, only an absolute, unshakable weight. "The linen is clean, Mr. Sterling," Gabriel said softly, looking down into Monty's eyes, "and my daughter is doing her job." Montgomery Sterling stared up at Gabriel Cross, his face darkening with a mixture of disbelief and deep-seated elitist anger. In his 3 years managing night operations at the Grand Crest, no hourly employee, let alone an aging, night shift maintenance worker, had ever dared to stand directly in his path, much less address him with such quiet, immovable authority. Excuse me? Monty scoffed, his voice rising sharply as he straightened his designer tie, trying desperately to inflate his stature. Did you just address me, old man? Gabriel stood completely motionless. He did not raise his hands, nor did he alter his calm, analytical posture. But his dark eyes remained fixed on Monty with a penetrating stillness that made the younger man's skin crawl. I said my daughter is doing her job, Gabriel repeated smoothly. His voice was a low, resonant rumble, calm as a subterranean river. She respected the hotel's guests by waiting for them to leave before clearing the room, as stated in Section 4 of your employee handbook. There was no cause to throw your cup onto her tray. Arya stepped forward quickly, placing a gentle hand on her father's forearm. She knew how hard her father worked, and while she appreciated his protection, she also knew how ruthless men like Monty could be towards staff without influence. It's all right, Dad, Arya said softly, keeping her voice composed. I can handle the tray. Monty let out a bitter, mocking laugh, taking a step sideways to address the few staff members who had paused their work to watch the confrontation. Unbelievable, Monty sneered, shaking his head with open contempt. A floor buffer giving me lectures on hotel policy. Look at you, Gabe. You're 50 years old, wearing a faded jumpsuit with grease under your fingernails, earning $15 an hour pushing a broom. You think, because you worked some low-grade security gig in the past, you get to speak to me like an equal? Monty leaned in closer to Gabriel, pointing a manicured finger at Gabriel's brass name badge. You and your daughter are here because I allow you to be here, Monty hissed, lowering his voice to a malicious whisper. She's a part-time server paying off cheap college textbooks, and you're a glorified janitor who couldn't even afford a decent suit if his life depended on it. You don't tell me what is or isn't disrespect. Gabriel looked down at the finger pointed near his chest. To any ordinary man, such words were designed to humiliate. But Gabriel had spent two decades sitting across interrogation tables from international arms brokers, cartel bosses, and corrupt politicians. Monty's childish insults carried zero emotional weight. Instead, Gabriel noted 3 key physical details about Monty in less than 2 seconds. A nervous twitch in his left eyelid indicating high stress and sleep deprivation, an expensive gold watch set 3 minutes fast, and a subtle scent of cheap cologne masking the smell of stale alcohol details that suggested the manager was embezzling or covering up personal financial troubles. Gabriel reached calmly into his jacket pocket, pulled out the small insulated flask of hot chamomile tea he had carried down from the mezzanine, and gently placed it into Arya's hands. Drink this before it gets cold, sweetheart, Gabriel said softly to Arya, ignoring Monty entirely. Your shift ends in 20 minutes. Hey, I'm talking to you, Monty snapped, infuriated by Gabriel's complete lack of reaction. Don't turn your back on me. Monty reached out aggressively, intending to grab Gabriel by the shoulder to force him around. The moment Monty's fingers hovered an inch from his jacket, Gabriel moved. It wasn't an explosive strike. It was a fluid, lightning-fast rotational shift of his upper frame. Gabriel didn't even raise his fists. He simply caught Monty's wrist with 2 fingers, applying a microscopic leverage pressure directly to the median nerve. Monty froze instantly. A sharp, paralyzing jolt of agony shot up his arm, locking his shoulder in place and forcing him down onto his tiptoes. His mouth opened in a silent gasp of shock, all the color draining from his face in a fraction of a second. To anyone watching from 20 feet away, it looked as if Gabriel had merely reached out to steady the manager from stumbling. I suggest you keep your hands to yourself, Mr. Sterling, Gabriel whispered in Monty's ear, his tone entirely polite, dry, and terrifyingly cold. A man in your position shouldn't make physical contact with staff. It creates legal liabilities. Gabriel released the wrist. Monty stumbled back 2 paces, clutching his hand to his chest. His heart pounded wildly against his ribs, his eyes wide with a sudden, primitive instinct of fear he couldn't comprehend. He looked at Gabriel's broad, calm shoulders and realized, with a chill running down his spine, that the man standing before him was not a janitor. He was a predator who had chosen not to bite. Before Monty could regain his composure or shout for security, the heavy glass entrance doors at the front of the lobby burst open. A crisp, freezing gust of wind blew into the warm atrium, accompanied by the low, heavy thrum of 3 blacked-out Chevy Tahoes pulling into the VIP driveway under heavy police escort. 4 armed men in crisp charcoal suits, with earpieces, stepped through the doors, scanning the lobby with clinical, military precision. Walking in the center of the security diamond was a pale, middle-aged man in a high-collared trench coat, holding a heavy leather briefcase handcuffed to his left wrist. It was Victor Vance, the federal government's prime witness in a multi-billion-dollar cartel prosecution, arriving 6 hours ahead of schedule under emergency relocation orders. Inside the lobby, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The front desk staff stood up straight, and Monty quickly rubbed his wrist, trying to smooth his jacket as he prepared to greet the high-profile guests. Up on the mezzanine level, Gabriel stepped back into the shadows of the marble pillars. His eyes narrowed as he watched the witness walk toward the private express elevator leading to the presidential suite on the 30th floor. Gabriel's gaze didn't linger on the witness. Instead, his trained eyes tracked 2 men sitting silently near the lobby bar, men wearing dark coats who had just quietly adjusted their earpieces the moment Vance entered the building. The storm is here, Gabriel thought, his face setting into a mask of iron. He looked down at Aria, who was calmly sipping the warm tea he had brought her. "Go to the break room, Aria," Gabriel said quietly into his collar radio. "Change into your street clothes and wait for me. We're going home early tonight." The heavy double doors of the 30th floor presidential suite closed with a muted, vacuum-sealed click, sealing off the highest floor of the Grand Crest Hotel from the rest of the world. Outside the floor-to-ceiling panoramic windows, the city below was a vast, glittering grid drowned in the silver haze of the midnight rain. Inside the suite, the air was thick with the sharp scent of nervous sweat and ozone. Victor Vance dropped his heavy leather briefcase onto the glass dining table with a loud metallic clatter. The 52-year-old former chief financial officer for the syndicate was visibly trembling. His pale skin was slick with perspiration, his tie loosened, his bloodshot eyes darting frantically toward every shadow in the dimly lit foyer. "I told you we shouldn't have stopped in this city," Vance gasped, clutching his chest as he paced the length of the silk carpet. "The syndicate has eyes everywhere. They knew the safe house in Chicago was blown before we even crossed state lines. What makes you think a commercial hotel is any safer?" Standing near the armored suite entrance were 2 senior U.S. Marshals from the regional branch agents Miller and Drake. Both wore dark tactical suits with concealed sidearms, their expressions strained and exhausted after 72 hours of continuous tactical transport. Agent Miller, a tall man with a stern jaw and graying temples, checked his encrypted satellite comlink before looking at Vance. "Keep your voice down, Mr. Vance. This location wasn't logged in the Federal Transport Registry. The regional office routed us here under an emergency alias. The hotel's 30th floor is completely locked down. The service elevators are restricted, and local authorities don't even know you're in the state." Local authorities. Vance let out a hysterical, bitter laugh. "The man who wants me dead doesn't hire local cops, agent. He hires professional liquidation teams. The moment my name hit your encrypted relay, a clock started ticking. And that clock is monitored by us. Agent Drake countered firmly, adjusting his shoulder holster. You stay away from the windows, keep the briefcase locked, and let us do our job until the federal tactical convoy arrives at dawn. 30 floors below, in the quiet maintenance sub-basement of the hotel, Gabriel Cross stood beside a wall of silent circuit breaker panels. The basement was cool and dark, smelling of wet concrete, industrial oil, and motor grease. Gabriel had removed his heavy navy work jacket, wearing only a black thermal shirt that stretched tight across his muscular chest and broad shoulders. He was holding a small, handheld radio frequency scanner, a vintage, modified military receiver he had assembled himself from spare parts. The small LCD screen glowed faint amber in the dim light, its frequency needle bouncing erratically. Static, then a rhythmic, high-frequency digital pulse. Gabriel's thumb froze on the tuning dial, his eyes narrowed. The pulse wasn't standard hotel security chatter. It wasn't the police band either. It was an encrypted burst transmission operating on an ultra-wideband military frequency, a sophisticated burst signal used almost exclusively by high-tier mercenary contractors to coordinate silent tactical breaches. Gabriel closed his eyes for 2 seconds, his mind immediately overlaying the digital frequency layout onto a 3-dimensional blueprint of the Grand Crest. The signal wasn't coming from outside the building. It was originating from inside the hotel, specifically from the 28th floor mechanical room, directly 2 floors below the presidential suite. They're already inside, Gabriel calculated instantly. They didn't track Vance from the highway. They were waiting inside the perimeter before Vance even stepped out of the Tahoe. Gabriel opened his eyes. The calm, gentle demeanor of the humble night guard vanished completely, replaced by the razor-sharp focus of Commander Cross. He reached into a hollowed-out metal toolbox beneath his workbench. Inside lay no weapons, no handguns, no tactical knives, no grenades. Under federal cover protocols, carrying unauthorized firearms would instantly compromise his dark cover status if stopped by local authorities. Instead, Gabriel pulled out 3 simple items: a heavy roll of black industrial duct tape, a 6-inch steel screwdriver, and a pair of reinforced Kevlar-lined work gloves. He slipped the gloves onto his broad hands, flexing his fingers twice to test the grip. Before heading to the service stairs, Gabriel checked his personal earpiece, switching to the private internal channel connecting his receiver to the break room on the ground floor. "Aria," Gabriel spoke into his collar mic, his voice dropping to a low, soothing baritone. "Are you in the staff lounge?" Through the small speaker, Aria's voice came back clear and steady. "Just finished changing out of my uniform, Dad. I've got my bag. Are we heading to the subway?" "Listen to me carefully, sweetheart," Gabriel said, his tone perfectly measured, calm enough to prevent panic, yet firm enough to command absolute obedience. "I need you to stay inside the break room. Lock the door from the inside, pull the blinds over the interior window, and do not open it for anyone, not even hotel management." There was a brief pause on the line. Aria was a criminology student. She knew her father's vocal cadences better than anyone. She picked up on the sudden, subtle shift in the air instantly. "Dad?" Aria asked, her voice dropping to a sharp whisper. "Is something wrong? Did something happen upstairs?" "Nothing you need to worry about," Gabriel replied smoothly, his boots making zero sound as he glided toward the heavy steel fire door leading to the stairwell. "Just a minor security protocol check. The building is going on a temporary maintenance lockdown. I'll come get you the moment it's clear. Promise me you'll stay put." "Okay, Dad," Aria agreed, though hesitation lingered in her tone. "Be careful." "Always," Gabriel said softly. He clicked off the channel, stepped into the concrete stairwell, and closed the heavy steel door behind him. The stairwell was cold, echoing with the distant, low hum of the building's ventilation shafts. Gabriel didn't take the elevator. Elevators were death traps in a tactical breach. Instead, he took the concrete stairs 3 at a time, moving his massive frame with a terrifying, silent swiftness that defied his age. As he reached the 28th floor landing, the emergency exit lights suddenly flickered twice, turned a dull, ominous red, and went completely dead. The low hum of the hotel's central air conditioning cut off simultaneously. Up on the 30th floor, every light inside the presidential suite plummeted into absolute darkness. The breach had begun. The pitch-black darkness inside the 30th floor presidential suite was total, sudden, and suffocating. Outside, the rain slashed against the glass panes, illuminated only by the faint, eerie glow of the city's distant skyscrapers. Inside, the quiet hum of luxury gave way to the sharp, metallic clack of weapons being drawn in the dark. "Stay down," Agent Miller bellowed, dropping to one knee beside the mahogany dining table. His right hand brought up his Glock 19, the tactical flashlight mounted under the barrel cutting a sharp, blinding beam through the shadow-draped foyer. "Drake, secure the witness. Check the secondary breakers." "Main lines severed," Agent Drake shouted back, his voice strained as he grabbed the back of Victor Vance's trench coat, dragging the whimpering accountant forcibly toward the master bedroom. "This isn't a power grid failure. They cut the fiber optic line directly from the sub-distribution node." Vance was hyperventilating, his knees buckling beneath him as he clutched the handcuffed briefcase to his chest like a shield. "They're here. I told you they're inside the building." "Shut up and move," Drake snapped, slamming the heavy, reinforced bedroom door shut behind them and deadbolting the lock. Down on the ground floor, the power outage hit the main lobby with immediate jarring effect. The grand crystal chandeliers flickered out, leaving only dim, amber emergency exit signs glowing along the granite walls. Behind the front desk, Montgomery Sterling let out a frustrated groan, dropping his gold pen onto the marble counter. "What in the hell is engineering doing down there?" Monty muttered angrily, adjusting his lapel as he grabbed a heavy flashlight from beneath the register. "First, the maintenance staff talks back. Now the main grid drops on a night we have VIPs in the penthouse." Monty strutted toward the central security office near the rear service corridor, his leather shoes clicking loudly in the darkened hall. "Gabe," he shouted toward the stairwell door. "Gabe, get your useless carcass over here and check the transformer backup. If the elevators are frozen with guests inside, I'm holding you personally responsible." He pushed open the door to the central security room and froze dead in his tracks. Sitting in the main leather swivel chair was the hotel's head security officer, slumped forward over the illuminated console, unconscious. Standing over him were 2 tall, heavily built men dressed in sleek, unmarked black tactical gear, wearing night vision goggles pushed up on their foreheads and suppressed submachine guns slung across their chests. One of the men was holding a digital jamming device plugged directly into the hotel's master server rack, wiping the live camera feeds for the top 5 floors. Monty's flashlight beam wobbled violently as his hands began to shake uncontrollably. The smug, arrogant composure he had worn all evening shattered in a single, terrifying second. His mouth opened to scream, but only a dry, squeaking sound escaped his throat. The taller mercenary turned slowly, his cold, colorless eyes fixing on Monty. Without a word, he raised a gloved hand, grabbed Monty by the collar of his tailored Italian suit, and yanked him effortlessly into the room, slamming him face first against the steel filing cabinets. Please," Monty blubbered, dropping his flashlight as he sank to his knees, tears instantly welling in his eyes. "Don't shoot. I'm just the manager. I don't know anything. Whatever you want." The mercenary didn't even bother to look at him, He pressed his earpiece, speaking in a low, foreign-accented rasp. Team leader command. Ground security office neutralized. Main feed is dark. Lift override installed. Assault team cleared for 30th floor entry. Copy command. A harsh voice crackled back through the earpiece. Breaching 30th floor now. 5 minutes to extraction. Leave no witnesses. The mercenary shoved Monty into the corner under the desk. Stay quiet, rat, or you get a bullet through the spine. Monty wrapped his arms around his knees, shivering violently in the dark, his pants damp with cold sweat as he wept in silent, pathetic terror. All his talk of status, money, and authority vanished, leaving behind only a helpless coward begging for his life under a desk. Meanwhile, on the dark, soundproofed landing of the 29th floor service stairs, Gabriel Cross stood silently in the shadow of a concrete pillar. He didn't move. He didn't make a sound. His breathing was so slow, so shallow, that he seemed to blend entirely into the surrounding darkness. Above him, on the 30th floor landing, the heavy steel door creaked open. 4 heavily armed mercenaries stepped out into the hallway, moving in a tight, professional tactical stack. They wore infrared goggles, their silenced carbines raised, their boots stepping with practiced, muffled precision along the carpeted floor toward the presidential suite. Gabriel's sharp eyes tracked them through the narrow crack in the stairwell door frame. He didn't need night vision goggles. His mind mapped their exact positions, their weapon calibers, their spacing intervals, and the precise angle of their blind spots as they moved down the corridor. He counted 4 assault operatives on the floor, 1 communications operator in the lobby security room, and likely 2 perimeter scouts outside. A professional 6-man liquidation squad. Gabriel reached down and tightened the Kevlar gloves on his hands. He unclipped the 6-inch steel screwdriver from his work belt, holding it in a reverse tactical grip against his forearm. He looked down the stairwell shaft toward the ground floor where Aria was locked in the break room. His dark eyes softened for a fraction of a second, filled with an unyielding, protective fire. Not in my hotel, Gabriel thought. Not while my daughter is under this roof. Gabriel stepped out from behind the pillar, slipping into the dark 30th floor hallway right behind the rear guard operator, like a ghost rising from the deep. The 30th floor hallway was a long, carpeted canyon of pitch-black darkness, punctuated only by the faint, eerie crimson glow of the emergency door lights. The air was dead quiet, save for the muffled patter of rain against the thick exterior glass at the end of the corridor. 4 mercenaries moved in a tight tactical diamond toward the presidential suite, their silenced carbines held at low ready. They walked with the fluid confidence of seasoned professionals, their night vision optics painting the world in shades of phosphor green. They never heard Gabriel step out of the stairwell shadows. He didn't wear tactical boots. His soft-soled work shoes made 0 sound against the plush carpet. He closed the 10-foot gap behind the rearguard operator in less than 2 seconds, moving with the terrifying, predatory grace of a phantom. Gabriel didn't hesitate. He reached out with his left hand, cupping the rearguard operator's chin while his right hand pressed the flat, thick handle of his steel screwdriver directly against the side of the man's neck, striking the vagus nerve with surgical precision. The operator didn't even have time to gasp. His eyes rolled back instantly, his body going completely limp as his central nervous system short-circuited. Before the unconscious mercenary could hit the floor or drop his carbine, Gabriel caught the man under his arms, stripped the silenced weapon from his sling with a single fluid motion and eased the body down against the wall without a single rustle of fabric. Time elapsed, 3 seconds, 3 operators remained. Gabriel didn't stop. He melded back into the recessed doorway of room 1312 as the 3rd operator turned his head, sensing a subtle shift in the air pressure behind him. Vargas, the third operator whispered into his throat mic, sweeping his suppressed barrel toward the dark rear of the hall. Vargas, report position. Only static answered. Check the rear, the team leader ordered from the front of the stack, his voice low and tense as he halted 2 feet from the presidential suite door. The third mercenary took 2 cautious steps backward into the dark, his weapon raised, his tactical flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the blackness. As the light beam passed the doorway of room 312, Gabriel struck. A broad, Kevlar-gloved hand erupted from the shadow, grabbing the barrel of the mercenary's carbine and forcing it upward just as the operator squeezed the trigger. Faft, faft. 2 suppressed rounds cracked harmlessly into the plaster ceiling. Before the man could react, Gabriel stepped inside his guard. He drove his elbow straight into the operator's solar plexus, knocking the wind out of him, then delivered a brutal, short-range palm strike directly under the man's chin. The mercenary's head snapped back violently, his helmet striking the door frame with a dull thud before he collapsed onto the carpet, completely out cold. Contact rear, the second operator screamed, spinning around and opening fire into the darkness. Faft, faft, faft. Subsonic rounds chewed through the wallpaper, spraying plaster dust into the air. But Gabriel was already gone. The moment he dropped the second man, he slipped low along the floor, using the darkness and the narrow width of the corridor to his absolute advantage. The second operator swept his light frantically, but Gabriel emerged from beneath the flashlight beam. Gabriel grabbed the operator's tactical vest, using the man's own momentum to slam him violently against the wall. With a swift, practiced twist of the wrist, Gabriel disarmed the man, locked his elbow, and drove a knee into his ribcage, dropping him instantly to his knees before sweeping his legs out from under him. In less than 12 seconds, 3 elite mercenaries lay unconscious in the hallway. At the front of the suite door, the team leader spun around, his night vision goggles sweeping over the quiet corridor. Panic, raw and unadulterated, seized his chest as he realized his entire team had been neutralized in the dark without a single alarm raised. "Who the hell are you?" the team leader roared, raising his weapon and spraying a volley of rounds down the center of the hall. Gabriel didn't answer with words. He stepped out from the shadow of a decorative marble pillar 5 feet away. Before the team leader could acquire his target, Gabriel hurled the heavy steel screwdriver he held in his left hand. The tool whistled through the air, striking the team leader's night vision mount with smashing force. The impact shattered the delicate optics, blinding the mercenary with a burst of internal sparks and sending him stumbling backward against the suite door. Gabriel closed the distance in a heartbeat. He caught the team leader's carbine, wrenched it from his grip, and delivered a devastating right hook to the man's jaw, followed by a sweep that sent the squad leader crashing hard onto his back. Gabriel stepped over the groaning man, pressed his boot firmly against his chest, and leaned down into his line of sight. "Your contract is terminated," Gabriel whispered, his voice as cold and vast as a winter grave. He reached down, pulled the emergency radio from the squad leader's vest, and clicked the channel button. Down in the ground floor security room, the mercenary holding Montgomery Sterling under the desk heard his earpiece static clear. "Command, this is leader." Gabriel's voice came through the speaker, perfectly mimicking the squad leader's low, foreign-accented rasp. 30th floor is secure. Witness neutralized. Send the ground operator up to the service elevator for extraction immediately. The mercenary in the security office grunted in approval. "Copy that, leader. Moving up now." Under the desk, Monty wept silently, his eyes wide with horror as he watched the mercenary sling his submachine gun, step out of the office, and head toward the main lobby elevators. Up on the 30th floor, Gabriel dropped the radio stepped over the unconscious mercenaries, and approached the heavy, bullet-scarred door of the presidential suite. He didn't knock with a weapon. He tapped 3 times in a distinct, rhythmic pattern, 2 short taps, one long, a tactical hand code known only to senior U.S. Marshals command staff. Inside the bedroom, Agent Miller held his breath, his gun aimed at the door. When he heard the 3 taps, his jaw dropped in utter shock. That's the director's override code, Miller whispered, his hands trembling as he slowly approached the door. He unlocked the deadbolt and pulled it open. Standing in the dim light of the doorway was Gabriel Cross, wearing his faded navy work trousers, his black thermal shirt doused in sweat and plaster dust, his broad hands covered in Kevlar gloves. Agent Miller stared at him, his mouth agape. Commander Cross, you're the night guard?" Gabriel didn't smile. "Secure your witness, Miller. The floor is clear, but we have one more operator on the ground and my daughter is downstairs." The service elevator descended toward the basement levels with a silent, hypnotic hum. Inside the dim metal cab, the final mercenary, the communications operator, who had held Montgomery Sterling captive, checked his tactical watch. The digital numbers glowed green, 3 minutes to the scheduled exit window. He gripped his suppressed submachine gun, his eyes fixed on the floor indicator. He expected to find his squad leader waiting on the upper concourse with the high-value target's briefcase. He didn't expect the elevator doors to slide open on the ground floor to reveal a completely empty, shadow-draped corridor. The mercenary stepped out cautiously, his weapon raised to his shoulder. "Leda?" He called out into his throat mic, his boots making a soft thud against the linoleum. "I'm on the main service level. Where is the extraction team?" Silence answered. Only the low, rhythmic drip of a leaking pipe echoed down the dark hallway. A sudden chill ran down the mercenary's spine. His tactical instincts screamed that something was fundamentally wrong. He began to back toward the elevator, his thumb clicking his weapons selector switch to full automatic. Before he could step back into the cab, a sharp metallic crash echoed from the far end of the service corridor near the staff break room. The mercenary froze. He swept his tactical light toward the sound. The beam illuminated a cracked wooden door with a small plastic sign that read, "Staff Lounge, Authorized Personnel Only." Through the narrow glass panel in the door, he caught the movement of a shadow, someone moving inside. The mercenary's lips curled into a cold, cruel smirk. He didn't care about hotel staff, but if someone inside that room had witnessed their tactical insertion, he couldn't leave a loose end. He strode toward the break room, his gloved hand coming up to raise his barrel. Inside the break room, Gabriel Cross sat at the small wooden table, her hands wrapped around the insulated metal flask her father had given her. She had kept her promise. She had locked the door from the inside, pulled the blinds over the interior window, and sat in the dark for 40 minutes. But when the building's main power cut out and the faint, rhythmic pops of suppressed gunfire echoed through the ventilation shafts 3 floors up, her criminology training kicked in. She knew those sounds. She knew the difference between a transformer blowing out and the distinct acoustic signature of subsonic tactical fire. Suddenly, a heavy boot slammed against the lock of the break room door. Bang! The wooden frame splintered, the deadbolt tearing free from the wall as the door burst open. Aria scrambled back from the table, her heart hammering against her ribs, but she didn't scream. She grabbed a heavy steel thermos from her bag, raising it defensively as a tall figure in dark tactical gear stepped into the room, his tactical flashlight blinding her. Well, the mercenary hissed in his low, foreign accent, sweeping his submachine gun directly toward her chest. "Look what we have here, a little college girl hiding in the dark." "Get back," Aria said, her voice trembling slightly, but her eyes burning with fierce determination as she backed against the wall. "Federal marshals are on their way." The mercenary let out a harsh, mocking laugh. "Federal marshals don't know we're here, little girl. And even if they did, you won't be around to tell them what you saw." He raised his suppressed barrel, aligning his sights directly between her eyes. His finger tightened over the trigger curve. "Drop the weapon." The voice didn't come from behind him. It didn't come from the hallway. It came from the shadows directly beside the vending machine, a deep, thunderous baritone so cold, so absolute, that the temperature in the small room seemed to plummet 10 degrees. The mercenary started to spin around, his barrel shifting toward the shadow. Gabriel Cross stepped out of the dark. He moved with a speed that defied the laws of human reaction time. Before the mercenary could bring his weapon to bear, Gabriel caught the barrel of the submachine gun with his left Kevlar-gloved hand, forcing it upward as a suppressed burst ripped into the acoustic ceiling tiles. Theft. In the same split second, Gabriel's right hand struck like a sledgehammer. He drove an open palm strike directly into the mercenary's sternum, shattering the tactical vest's ceramic plate and driving the air completely out of the man's lungs. The mercenary gasped, his eyes wide with shock, but Gabriel didn't give him a single second to recover. Gabriel twisted the submachine gun out of the man's grip, tossed it aside onto the break room couch, and grabbed the mercenary by the front of his tactical vest. With a display of raw, terrifying physical power, Gabriel lifted the 200-pound operative off his feet and slammed him headfirst against the concrete wall. The concrete cracked under the impact. The mercenary's helmet shattered, and he slid down to the floor like a sack of wet flour, completely unconscious before his boots touched the linoleum. Silence fell over the room once more, broken only by the soft, steady hum of the emergency lights flickering back on in the hallway. Aria stood frozen against the wall, her breathing ragged, her hands still clutching her steel thermos. She stared at the giant man standing in the center of the room, at the frayed navy work trousers, the sweat-soaked black thermal shirt, and the broad, calloused hands covered in Kevlar gloves. She stared at her father. Gabriel slowly turned around. The lethal, predatory focus in his dark eyes instantly melted away, replaced by the deep, infinite warmth of a father who had just protected his world. He stepped over the unconscious mercenary, approached Aria, and gently took the heavy thermos from her trembling hands, setting it on the table. "Are you hurt, Aria?" Gabriel asked softly, his voice deep, soothing, and entirely calm. Aria looked from the unconscious, heavily armed tactical operative on the floor back up into her father's eyes. Her mouth opened, but for 3 seconds, no sound came out. "Dad," Aria whispered, her voice cracking with a mixture of shock, awe, and overwhelming realization. You just took down a military contractor with your bare hands in 4 seconds." Gabriel offered a faint, humble smile, reaching out to gently pat her shoulder. "I told you I used to do security work before I took this job, sweetheart." "Security work," Aria gasped, half laughing, half crying as the adrenaline washed out of her system. "Dad, you didn't just do security work. What were you?" Before Gabriel could answer, heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. Emerging from the shadows of the corridor was Montgomery Sterling. The hotel manager was still pale, shivering, and covered in sweat, crawling along the wall like a terrified dog. When he peeked into the break room and saw the unconscious mercenary lying on the floor and Gabriel standing over him unscathed, Monty's jaw dropped so low it nearly touched his collar. "Gee, Gaby," Monty stammered, his eyes bulging out of his head as he stared at the fallen operative. You beat him. How did a janitor?" Gabriel turned his head slowly, looking at Monty over his broad shoulder. His dark eyes were cold, unblinking, and filled with a quiet authority that made Monty instantly collapse against the doorframe, his tongue frozen in his throat. "Go back under your desk, Mr. Sterling," Gabriel said softly. "The grown-ups are working." The pale, silver light of dawn cut through the dissipating storm clouds over the city, casting long, clean reflections across the wet asphalt of the driveway outside the Grand Crest Hotel. The quiet luxury of the financial district had been transformed into a perimeter of absolute military force. Over a dozen blacked-out tactical SUVs, armored personnel carriers, and marked federal response cruisers filled the entrance plaza, their red and blue strobe lights flashing silently against the wet glass rotunda. Federal agents in heavy body armor established a triple-tier security cordon around the property, while tactical snipers secured the rooftops of surrounding skyscrapers. Inside the grand lobby, the atmosphere was dead quiet. The amber emergency lights had been replaced by the hotel's restored chandelier illumination, exposing the aftermath of the night's events. Hotel staff stood clustered behind the marble reception desks, whispering in hushed, trembling tones as federal forensic teams swept through the corridors, tagging evidence and escorting the bound, zip-tied mercenaries toward transport vans. Standing near the center of the lobby, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm water with both hands, was Montgomery Sterling. The night operations manager looked like a ghost of his former self. His tailored Italian suit was wrinkled and stained with dust from the security room floor. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, and his hands shook so violently that water sloshed over the rim of his cup. "I'm the night operations manager," Monty stammered frantically to a young federal agent who was casually taking notes on a clipboard. "I was held at gunpoint. I need a medical evaluation. I demand to speak to whoever is in charge here." The agent didn't even look up from his notepad. "Sit down and stay out of the way, sir. Commander Lawson is on the floor." "Commander Lawson?" Monty blinked, wiping cold sweat from his forehead. "Who is Lawson?" "I own shares in this hotel's parent company. You people need to give me answers." Before the agent could respond, the heavy glass entrance doors swung open with commanding force. Stepping through the threshold was Special Agent in Charge Sarah Lawson, the director of the U.S. Marshals National Tactical Operations Group. She was a tall, sharp-featured woman in her late 40s, wearing a dark trench coat over her federal tactical uniform, her silver-streaked hair tied back in a tight military bun. Her posture exuded absolute authority, flanked by 6 fully geared tactical team leaders carrying short-barrel rifles. Lawson didn't pause at the front desk. She didn't look at the press vans gathering outside the police tape. Her sharp, piercing eyes swept across the lobby, ignoring Monty entirely as she marched directly toward the service elevator corridor. Supervisor Agent Miller stepped out of the elevator cab, leading the primary witness, Victor Vance, who was still clutching his handcuffed briefcase to his chest. Vance was pale, but completely unharmed. Lawson stopped in front of Miller. "Status of the high-value asset." "Asset is secure, Commander," Miller reported, standing at attention and giving a crisp salute. "0 injuries. The regional transport team has arrived to take custody for the federal grand jury hearing in D.C. "And the hostile liquidation team?" Lawson asked, her eyes narrowing. "Neutralized, ma'am," Miller replied, a quiet, reverent tone creeping into his voice. "All 6 mercenaries accounted for. 4 recovered on the 30th floor, 1 in the service lift, 1 in the basement. All disarmed, restrained, and alive for interrogation." Lawson's stern expression softened slightly, a rare, subtle smirk touching the corner of her lips. "I see. And where is the operative who executed the extraction?" Miller pointed toward the far end of the service corridor near the staff break room. He's wrapping up his shift, ma'am. Monty Sterling, who had limped over to eavesdrop on the conversation, scowled in confusion. Shift? What shift? You mean that old janitor, Gabe? Lawson turned her head slowly, looking down at Monty with cold, unblinking disdain. She didn't offer the hotel manager a single word. Instead, she adjusted her coat, turned on her heel, and walked straight toward the break room, her tactical squad following 2 paces behind in formal parade order. Monty stumbled after them, desperate to see what was happening, his mind refusing to accept the terrifying realization that had been creeping up his spine all morning. The break room door was pushed open gently. Inside, Gabriel Cross sat on the small wooden bench beside his daughter, Aria. He had removed his Kevlar gloves, setting them neatly beside his old toolbox. He held a hot paper cup of black coffee in his broad hands, chatting softly with Aria, whose head was resting comfortably against her father's broad shoulder. To anyone looking through the door, he appeared to be nothing more than a tired father wrapping up a long night of manual labor. Special Agent in Charge Sarah Lawson stopped 2 feet inside the room. She took a sharp step forward, brought her heels together with a military click, and raised her right hand to her temple, snapping a crisp, flawless federal salute directly to Gabriel. Behind her, the 6 tactical squad leaders brought their weapons to low ready and saluted in absolute, breathless unison. Commander Cross, Lawson spoke, her voice ringing with profound, unquestionable respect. On behalf of the Director of the United States Marshals Service and the Department of Justice, thank you for your service, sir. Aria looked up from her father's shoulder, her eyes wide as she watched the highest-ranking federal officers in the state bowing their heads to her father. Gabriel looked up from his coffee. He didn't jump up, he didn't boast. He simply set his cup down on the table, stood up smoothly to his full 6'2" height, and returned the salute with sharp, effortless precision. At ease, Sarah, Gabriel said softly, his deep voice filling the small room with warm familiarity. It's good to see you again. Standing in the doorway, Montgomery Sterling froze. His cup slipped from his fingers, crashing onto the linoleum floor and splashing water over his leather shoes. His eyes bulged out of his head, his face turning ghostly white as he stared at the man he had called a glorified janitor just 6 hours prior. "See, Commander," Monty gasped, his voice cracking violently. He's a commander?" Lawson turned her head toward Monty, her eyes flashing with razor-sharp authority. "Chief Commander Gabriel Cross," Lawson corrected, coldness dripping from every word. "Former National Director of Witness Security, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Valor, and the tactical architect who built the very protocols that keep this country's federal judiciary alive." Lawson stepped closer to Monty, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that made the manager tremble. "And as of 20 minutes ago, Commander Cross has personally authorized the federal seizure of your hotel's internal financial server logs to investigate your department's compliance with security regulations." Monty's knees buckled. He slid down the wall, collapsing onto the wet linoleum floor in total, pathetic ruin. The soft, golden sunlight of early morning streamed through the grand glass rotunda of the Grand Crest Hotel, illuminating the polished marble floor, where Montgomery Sterling sat collapsed against the base of a pillar. 2 federal agents flanked the disgraced manager, pulling him up by his elbows. His tailored suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and utter disbelief as he watched the scene unfold before him. "Montgomery Sterling," Agent Miller stated coldly, clicking a pair of steel handcuffs around Monty's wrists. "You are under arrest for obstruction of federal justice, failure to report a high-level security breach, and suspected complicity in facilitating unauthorized access to restricted hotel infrastructure. You have the right to remain silent. Monty didn't protest. He didn't shout for his lawyers or invoke his family's corporate shares. He simply stared, trembling, as he was led away past the line of hotel staff who watched his disgrace in silent, satisfied quiet. In the center of the lobby, Special Agent in Charge Sarah Lawson turned back to Gabriel Cross. "The tactical convoy is ready, Commander," Lawson said, holding out a sleek black leather folder bearing the gold-embossed seal of the United States Marshals Service. "The director personally signed your active duty reinstatement papers 3 hours ago. Your full security clearance, executive pension, and command authority over the National Witness Protection Division are fully restored." She opened the folder, revealing a gleaming, gold-plated master badge number 001 resting against black velvet. Beside it lay an official appointment decree naming Gabriel as the Senior Strategic Advisor to the Department of Justice. "Washington needs you back, Gabriel," Lawson said quietly, her tone filled with sincere hope. "Men with your operational instincts don't belong behind a floor buffer. Name your office, name your team, the entire agency is waiting for your return." Gabriel looked down at the gold badge shimmering under the morning light. For 22 years, that badge had defined every hour of his life. It had represented long nights in nameless safe houses, high-stakes tactical deployments, and the constant, heavy burden of keeping human lives safe from the shadows. He reached out, his broad, calloused fingers gently touching the polished metal edge of the badge. Then, with a calm, deliberate motion, Gabriel gently closed the leather folder and pushed it back toward Lawson. Lawson blinked, genuine surprise flickering across her sharp face. "Gabriel?" A quiet, profound smile touched Gabriel's lips, the smile of a man who had fought his battles, fulfilled his duty, and found complete peace with the choices he had made. "Thank you, Sarah," Gabriel said, his deep baritone smooth and steady as rock. "The agency is in good hands with you and Miller, but my time in the dark is finished." Lawson searched his eyes, seeing no hesitation, no regret, only the unshakable serenity of a true master who had nothing left to prove to the world. She let out a soft sigh, nodding slowly in understanding. "The country owes you a debt it can never repay, Commander Cross," Lawson said softly. She snapped a final, respectful salute. "Fly safe, sir." Gabriel returned the salute with crisp precision, then turned to his daughter, Aria, who was standing beside him with her bag slung over her shoulder, her dark eyes shining with quiet, emotional pride. "Ready to go home, sweetheart?" Gabriel asked gently. Aria smiled, stepping up beside her father and wrapping her arm securely through his broad elbow. "More than ready, Dad." As they walked together toward the hotel's heavy, revolving glass doors, Gabriel stopped by the maintenance rack near the lobby exit. He picked up his old, worn leather toolbox, along with the brass floor buffer key, and handed them neatly to the young junior maintenance worker who was standing nearby in awe. "Keep the motor clean, son," Gabriel said with a warm, encouraging nod, "and always check the ground wire before you plug it in." The young worker nodded hurriedly, gripping the key as if it were a handoff from a king. "Aye, yes, sir. Thank you, Commander." Gabriel and Aria stepped out of the Grand Crest Hotel into the crisp, cool morning air. The rain had completely stopped. The sky above the city was a vast, brilliant expanse of blue, the morning sun casting a warm golden glow over the quiet streets. The flashing red and blue lights of the federal vehicles receded into the background as the tactical convoy began to roll out, leaving behind a peaceful, restored world. They walked down the granite steps toward the subway entrance at the corner of the avenue. "So," Aria said, looking up at her father with a playful, teasing smirk as they walked side by side. Chief Commander Gabriel Cross, Master Tactical Architect, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Valor. Gabriel chuckled, his deep laugh echoing warmly in the morning air. That was a long time ago, Arya. Unbelievable. Arya shook her head, though her smile widened. All these years, I thought you were just really good at fixing light fixtures and making chamomile tea. I am really good at making chamomile tea, Gabriel countered smoothly, his dark eyes twinkling with quiet humor. And fixing light fixtures comes in handy when the power goes out. Arya stopped at the top of the subway stairs, looking up into her father's weathered, handsome face. Her expression turned earnest, filled with a deep, boundless affection. I'm proud of you, Dad, she said softly. Not because of the badge or the titles, but because no matter where we are, you're always there to protect me. Gabriel reached out, his large, warm hand gently patting her shoulder with the same protective tenderness he had shown her since she was a little girl. That's a father's job, Arya, Gabriel said softly, looking out over the quiet, sunlit city streets. The titles fade, the badges get put away, but family is the one thing worth standing in the dark for. Hand in hand, father and daughter walked down the stairs into the bright morning light, ready to begin the next chapter of their